Demystifying AI and Machine Learning. It's January 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Scott Schlee, and you're listening to Skyhigh Security CloudCast.
Security is a data protection problem, and it's difficult to protect data that's everywhere. Throughout the fabric of devices, the web, cloud applications, infrastructure, and among users. This creates security gaps. That's why we are here. Learn what it takes to defend your data. Welcome to CloudCast.
Welcome to the first CloudCast episode of 2024. Today we're uncloaking common misconceptions around artificial intelligence and machine learning. We'll explore the intricacies of sharing information with AI, the potential vulnerabilities in case of unauthorized access, and the valid concerns AI raises, as well as shedding light on common misconceptions. Joining me today is Nate Brady, Senior Enterprise Architect, and Tony Frum, Principal Engineer for Skyhigh Security. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Yep, same here.
Well, today, gentlemen, we want to talk about AI and machine learning and what kind of role it played in 2023 and what we can expect in 2024. So, right out of the gate, for those that do not know, including myself, the nuances, what exactly is the difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Great question, because these are both, I would say, they've kind of become, buzzwords, right? So, to start with, machine learning we've had for a long time, right? You could think of machine learning as, anytime you're using, statistics to figure out optimal mixes of different things. You can use machine learning in Excel. We've been doing this for a long time. So really think of anything that, maybe uses statistics or algorithms is to be machine learning. AI, and again, it's a bit of a soft definition, but I think where things are kind of settling is when you apply AI to, things like, solving problems at a higher level, right? When you abstract away, the math and you come to it with maybe a problem like natural language. So you say, hey, ChatGPT, give me some advice on this, right? That's not something that can be, broken down easily into statistics, right? So, when you start to use AI, I think in more of a natural way, of course, there's AIs that are not necessarily, natural language, some things are just the fact that it learns from experience and optimizes itself, I think is a good way of looking at AI versus ML.
So, am I wrong in assuming that machine learning is basically a subset of AI, or is that a wrong assumption?
I think AI is an implementation, I think, of machine learning. It's machine learning on steroids. I wouldn't say it's a subset, though, because, machine learning has been here longer, and it happens separately, right? For example, my smart thermostat is machine learning, right? It figures out that when when I'm home, at 6 p.m., we like it a little warmer, and then at 10 p.m. we like a little cooler, and it kind of figures that out, and that's machine learning. On the other hand, if I was to say, hey, thermostat, we're going to have 20 people over, for a party, and I don't want it to be too hot in here. Can you help me out? That would be a problem AI would take care of.
Yeah, and I think, if you were to go search online, you probably would find plenty of content that would say that machine learning is a subset of AI, but I think, I'm not entirely sure that this is 100% accurate, but my interpretation of that is, as a definition, artificial intelligence is a pretty broad set of technologies. It's basically defined as something that requires human level reasoning to do something. And that can take many, many forms. So in that sense, machine learning is a subset of AI. But when you say AI in 2024, with the advent of so many, generative AI capabilities coming on the scene in the last, 18 months, you think about ChatGPT and DALL-E and, all these different things that are generating images and video and audio and text and so forth, that I think is technologically more similar to AI. So to machine learning. And so in that case, it wouldn't. I don't think that would be accurate to call machine learning a subset of that, but it is a subset of the higher, more definitional AI.
Yeah,
Would you say that's
no
accurate?
doubt, because all machine. I'm sorry. I mean, all AI uses some level of machine learning, right? So I guess, yeah, I guess it's kind of like, technically all squares are rectangles, right? But I would never describe a square as a rectangle, right? Or a rectangle as a square, right? I would use each their own words, even though technically, right, a square fits the definition of a rectangle.
We've seen AI in our everyday life, but in particular, what role has AI and machine learning played in shaping our data security practices in 2023?
So I want to make sure the question is how does it affect our data security practices in 2023?
Yeah, exactly. How has it changed the way we look at data security practices? Because 18 months ago, not many people had even really came to the concept of AI other than thinking that, the Terminator or something insane like that, which, we'll give it another 18 months before we start worrying about that. But in the past 18 months or so that we've seen AI come onto the field, what has AI changed about how we look at and how we handle our data security practices?
Well, a couple things that are part of our daily lives. One element of it is I frequently talk to customers about the use of AI. So the use of AI tools like obviously ChatGPT. Another one that comes up a lot is GitHub Copilot. And there's a lot of concerns around data security is really primary, but there's also intellectual property concerns. So, if I'm using an AI tool to generate code, can I use that code and claim it as my own, and things of that nature? So there's lots of concerns around that. Another element of it is customers are using AI, building their own models on their own data. And in doing so, they're moving around tremendous amounts of data that could possibly be sensitive, and building models off of it. And how do we build those data pipelines in such a way that we can successfully gather the right data to build the models, but make sure that through the process of gathering that data, we're ensuring that it's secure as it's moved, secure as it's stored, and so forth. So those are some kind of everyday conversations that we deal with related to that.
Yeah, I think to Tony's point, when it comes to AI, there's kind of there's two primary concerns. There is the risk of losing data that you are storing, that when you're building your own AI, right? So you're a company and you want to solve problems with an AI. In order to get that AI to learn, you're going to have to aggregate, some of your most sensitive data into one place, and you're probably going to have to put it into a cloud in order to get the resources to get this thing to train. And that represents a risk in itself, right? That aggregating data, putting it in the cloud, that sort of thing. Then you also have people that are using AIs that aren't yours, right? So they're using ChatGPT and this sort of thing. And you might disclose something to that that might be sensitive. Now, I think we'll probably get later in this discussion to the whole question of whether or not ChatGPT or other AIs are actually spying on you and how they store data. I think we can get into that. But I think at a high level, those are the two things that we need that people are worried about is the use of AI and giving third-party AIs information that they're not supposed to have, and also keeping training data sets secure, and also making sure that only the right data goes into the models that they're building. So I think hopefully it's a whole can of worms that hopefully we'll talk about more as we unfold this podcast.
Well, from the standpoint of intellectual property and ownership, What would stop a competitor from being able to access sensitive IP info for a company that was accidentally shared in a tool like ChatGPT?
So I think this comes down in some ways, I want to say this. I don't want to say it's not a risk at all because there's always a risk anytime you put information out there. You're relying on a company like OpenAI to handle your data the way that they say they're going to, right? So to me, this is more of a legal framework issue that you have to deal with. So, ChatGPT says that when you say don't train on my data, that they're not going to train on your data. It's also kind of important to understand how these AIs actually work. That they don't have a database, typically where they go and look up stuff. So if I say, if I told it Nate Brady's address, and then you went and it trained on that, and you went and asked what Nate Brady's address is, it probably isn't going to remember something like that, right? And AI is connecting different sorts of concepts together, and it uses inference and all these other things that it doesn't memorize the way that a human might memorize. It doesn't memorize. So a lot of times, by giving it that sensitive information, as long as it hasn't been specifically instructed to record that and look it up later, it probably isn't going to, right? Now, I'm not saying go give ChatGPT your life history, because ultimately that data that you put in there, right? You put it into your chat, that goes into a chat history, and that's more for you than it is for ChatGPT. But if somebody else was to gain access to your ChatGPT account, it could see all the things that you asked it, right? And of course, ChatGPT has to store that data someplace, and that's also vulnerable. So I think that there is some valid concerns there, but not necessarily for the reasons that people think. It's not like it's a person that's going to remember everything you tell it.
I agree, but there's also some. So it depends on what it is you're sending, right? I mean, if you were to tell ChatGPT what your social security number is, it's probably not going to do anything. Like you said, it's not trained to remember something like that. However, if you were to take a press release for some like acquisition that was going to happen that wasn't public yet, and you were to ask ChatGPT to help wordsmith it, and that got trained, and it was an entire series of paragraphs or something like that might actually contain some meaningful information, then if they trained on that, potentially if somebody were to then ask about something related to that, it might say that this company was acquired by that company or will be acquired by that company based on that data being trained on. It's theoretically possible, at least, that would happen. Maybe not super likely. So there's some risk there, but I frequently talk to customers in the same way that Nate was saying. That this is really kind of a misplaced concern, because if you think about it, if I were to take that same press release, it would be much less of a risk actually if I were to send that to ChatGPT versus posting it on LinkedIn. So, and both of those are effectively web uploads to a web-based application. And so fundamentally, from a security control perspective, it's the same control that you would use to protect against something like that. In actuality, there's much worse places you could put it. And so the novelty of the AI element doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
customers don't really know exactly what to make of this, and it's an elevated concern for them. But I think sometimes the priority that they place on it is a little bit misplaced.
So what exactly happened, say, for example, the Samsung ChatGPT data breach last year?
So Samsung had, I believe, 3 separate engineers on 3 separate occasions upload intellectual property in the form of source code to ChatGPT. I'm assuming for just some help in rewriting certain parts of the code and so forth. And it is possible. I mean, I don't know all the details about what was sent to ChatGPT, how complete it was, how much context it received, what the question was, but if you were to tell ChatGPT, hey, this is some code that does XYZ, and is there any way to optimize it, for example, then potentially it could spit out similar answers if someone else asked, give me some code to do XYZ. But again, it's not something that is, it wouldn't say, well, Samsung has code. This is a copy of the
Right.
code that Samsung sent me. That wouldn't happen. And so the concern of somebody being able to glean meaningful information out of that is not super high. And again, you contrast that with what if they put it in a public GitHub repository? That's an entirely different scenario. That's way, way more significant. So the AI element of it again is just it's just not that
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah, I mean, where you have some risk is, let's say, the Coca-Cola recipe is meant to be super risky or super secret, right? And let's say if you gave that to ChatGPT, it's not going to say, if you say what's the recipe for Coke, it's not going to tell you. But if you were to say what goes into a cola, some of that might leak into there, right? The concepts of what goes in there and in that kind of stuff might change its definition of cola. Or if you said, if your recipe for Oreo cookies, and you said, hey, how do I make, you know, I don't know, something like an Oreo, a chocolate cookie with cream inside, right? It might give you a recipe that was influenced by Oreo's recipe. So that's the risk. So you could lose intellectual property, but it's not as if, to Tony's point, it's not going to say, here's Samsung source code for XYZ.
So for the average lay person, maybe they don't understand all the nuances of what Chat GPT stores and what it doesn't. Do you think the average person knows that, or are they going under the assumption of worst case scenario where anything and everything you say is on the internet forever?
I think that it depends on who we're talking about. If you were to ask my parents, for example, what their perception of it is, I would say at this point that tools like ChatGPT are so realistic and so human-like that if you're not a technologist at all and you don't have any idea how it works, it's very easy to walk away with the perception that this thing functions like a human brain. It'll actually remember what I've said to it, and it can regurgitate that to somebody else. And that's, as we've talked about, that's not really the way it works.
And what role does SSE play in protecting against data breaches like this?
Well, I think it comes back to those two pieces, right? You've got one, is you can, like, the chat history, for example. You can prevent ChatGPT from remembering your chat history. You could prevent, now this comes down to just shadow IT in general. You can prevent uploads. So, like, now you can upload data to ChatGPT and say, hey, look at this file and tell me how I can improve it. You can prevent those uploads, right? So you can really think of ChatGPT as any other type of shadow IT, and those controls are going to apply to it. But then on the other side, you have CASB, which is maybe those training data sets, right? Let's say you're going to implement your own AI. Maybe you're a healthcare company, and you throw all the patient data into S3, right? You're going to want to make sure, one, that the S3 bucket that you're maybe putting it in is got the right controls on it, right? That's a kind of a function of CASB or CSPM. And then you've also got, you want to make sure that the data is what you think it is. So a lot of times before training a data set, engineers, your data engineers will go through and sanitize it, right? So they'll remove personal information from those. So I think you could also use an SSE to kind of scan for that and make sure that's really the case, right? So if I've got a terabyte of data that's supposedly anonymized, if I scan for it, I shouldn't be able to find any personal information in there. And that's kind of a check and balance that I think you could use, a tool like Skyhigh for.
And Tony, did you have something you wanted to interject?
No, Nate kind of beat me to the punch. He basically covered it. It's the shadow IT, ensuring people are using the tools you want. It's applying data security to the tools that you allow them to have access to. It's kind of fancy controls like the ability to disable the chat history on ChatGPT, which stops it from training on your data. And then again, the CASB controls for handling your own data for training your own models.
Rumor has it, Tony, I think you were the kind of the godfather of some of that functionality, actually.
Yeah, well, it worked out that we were able to find a way to actually force the disabling of that chat history, which, as much as we frequently tell customers that the novelty of the AI element is really not as important as the fact that people are uploading sensitive data to any cloud application that's public. Despite the fact that, we frequently tell them that, uh, we were able to find a way to make it to where you could remove that element of the equation, specifically with ChatGPT, by just forcing that if they're on a company-issued device going through our web security solution, then we can force that training to be disabled so that you can remove that. But in addition to that, you should still be doing DLP scanning on stuff that's uploaded. Actually, going back to the Samsung conversation, so they eventually, and they publicly stated all this. My belief is that now they are outright blocking the use of ChatGPT, but as an interim solution. And keep in mind, they had 3 separate incidents. At some point, initially, they put a restriction on the amount of data that you could send to ChatGPT. So that's another control that we use sometimes, where you just make it to where you can't post a question that's too long. So that way, if you're wordsmithing a press release or you're copying and pasting source code or something like that, you can't send too much. And then yet another control is preventing copy and paste, which these are all kind of compensating controls, but the real important one is the DLP scanning of anything that gets uploaded.
What do you think about companies like Samsung and Apple who are outright blocking services to AI services like ChatGPT?
I think it's a short-lived thing. I think that, and I've talked to a lot of customers. In fact, we've done some polling among our customers and asked, are you blocking the use of AI tools? And a lot of them said yes. But of the ones that said yes, a very large percentage of them answered a follow-up question saying, do you plan to eventually allow this? And the answer was yes. So, effectively, what I've learned from these surveys and talking to customers face to face is they're not real sure what to do. They're kind of getting their footing on how are we going to treat these tools, and then they so they plan on having some kind of security policy to allow the use of these tools, but to do it in a way that's secure. And in the shorter term, while they kind of get their ducks in a row, so to speak, they're just blocking them outright. There's not a lot of customers out there that are that really feel like it's realistic that they'll be able to block them forever. Because the fact is that, and actually Nate and I have talked about this before, about how this is very similar to the move to Office 365 from 15 years ago, where you have all these companies that are saying, oh yeah, we're never going to do that, we're not going to move to the cloud, we're staying on prem, and but there's all these business reasons for moving to the cloud, like all the cost savings, all the the extra collaboration capabilities and so forth. And there's so many business reasons to allow the use of AI tools. It improves the effectiveness of your employees, like by a lot. And so you can't really get away with not using it from a competitive perspective. You'll get left in the dust. And so I think that customers have actually learned from what's happened with revolutions in the past, and they realize that there is no avoiding this. It's going to happen. They will have to allow it, but they're just kind of taking a pause by blocking them for now. And I don't think there's a whole lot of customers that really feel like that's going to be a long-term strategy.
I'm not even sure that it's an effective short-term strategy, because you've got, obviously there's ChatGPT itself, but then you've got the obvious one that's an overlay, which is Bing. And then you've got so many other third parties that are basically back-ended by ChatGPT. Maybe they're ad-supported, that kind of thing, that in some ways by blocking the, I don't want to say good ones, but maybe the better ones, like the less risky, like ChatGPT is certainly, a less risk than, myai.ru, or, if that exists, right? Like, that sort of thing. So, when you kind of create a black market, I think, by blocking. So in some ways you want to look at strategies that Tony was talking about to where secure the use of it, because chances are if you start blocking, if you just say you can't use this, your customers, they may find one that works in some backdoor sort of way, and then the fact that it's working, they figure, well, this must be okay, so I'll give this one my data, right? So you have to be careful with the unintended consequences there.
Yeah.
That if you're going to block, you have to make sure you're being very thorough with blocking.
There's a lot of customers too that are in the process of building their own AI tool, and they intend to block everything else, but they're not going to block AI in general. They're just going to provide their own tool, and so many of them are using the OpenAI capabilities through Azure and just building their own tools through that, so that they've got legal contracts with Microsoft on how their data is handled and so forth. So I've talked to several customers that they're kind of still in the process of getting that fully rolled out, and that's what they're pausing for that.
And that was actually my next question, was what are the logistical possibilities of having a company specific AI assistant, something similar to ChatGPT, but just company specific? Is it feasible to have something that's going to be, I'm assuming, somewhat firewalled, or do you have to have that external communication to be able to keep up to date, get the latest information to be an efficient AI assistant?
Well, no, you're not. So at the end of the day, these models are just software, and while they take a huge amount of data to train the models, the actual running of the models, or sorry, a lot of data and processing power to train the models. Once the model is built, it's fairly portable, right? So to run your own instance of somebody else's trained AI is definitely feasible, right? The question is whether or not they'll let you do it, which it turns out that OpenAI and all this is out to that. And you'll find a lot of other there's like Mini GPT. There's a whole bunch of other AI models that you can use. Now, where it's more of a challenge is to train one from scratch, right? So to stand one up completely and train it on only your own data is that might not be feasible, right? You would need a very advanced data science team to be able to pull that off. But to take an existing model and add your own data to it is definitely feasible. And you could, you got to treat a trained AI model as software, right? Because that's what it is, right? So, if you think everybody has sensitive data in software and you use it every day and you have to secure, how it stores data, who can access it, and all of that. And AI is going to be, I think, honestly, no different. It is just software. I think the big risk when it comes to AI is training it, right? Very often we take care to keep our data in different places so that you avoid, somebody being able to come in and take everything in one swoop. But an AI training data set sometimes can look just like that. So that kind of goes back to the whole part of, take care when you're training your AI. But once it's done, you can treat your AI mostly like any other software with sensitive data in it.
So as AI-driven security becomes more prevalent, what kind of skills and knowledge should cybersecurity professionals develop to effectively work with these technologies? Is it going to be continued training? Is it going to be looking for people that already have those skill sets?
Well, personally, I think it's going to lower the bar a bit, right? Right now, if you're in security, you kind of have to have two types of knowledge. You have to have one about the policy, what should be happening, and what your organization wants to happen with its data. But then you kind of need the technical chops to see if whether or not that's the case. AI might make that second part of that easier, right? To where you can explain the policy to say, look, data that's like this, I don't want shared, right? So I think it will make IT security people so much more efficient at their jobs because they won't be doing a lot of tedious work opening, looking at packet traces or dump, it files and that kind of thing, and they'll be able to let that mundane work be handled by the AI, and then focus more of their effort on making sure that the AI is instructed properly on what to do. So I think it'll kind of, I know everybody's worried about jobs, and there are some. It's true, the very entry level jobs inside of IT might go away, but I don't think the jobs are going to go away. I think companies are going to become more secure because we're going to be able to use those resources and those people to do some more effective things.
Last year, we saw several instances of organizations, whether it's Hollywood or academia, that are addressing ethical use of AI, including writer and actor strikes in Hollywood to cover whether their likeness being generated in AI or content like your term paper or any kind of thesis. I'm curious about both of your opinions about how realistic that is, if this is something that is very much impending, whether it can be reined in. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think so. Legally speaking, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it because that's not my area of expertise. But from what I've seen, I have talked to some people who do know a little bit more about that, and I've talked to people who have evaluated the EULAs of different tools, and it kind of seems like the approach that the market's been taking is the equivalent of this is a tool, and whatever you do with it, you own, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it's you wouldn't go borrow some tools from or rent some tools from Home Depot and then expect them to come lay claim to the design of some carpentry project that you slap together with their tools. And similarly, from what I've seen, the approach that these vendors are taking is whatever it is that you can get this model to generate to help you do your job is yours, because it doesn't do it on its own. It does it with prompts. It's AI does not just sit there and spawn ideas out of nowhere. It comes with the use of a human or use by a human. And I kind of expect that that's where society is going to land on this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that people are settling on, when whatever you create with AI is yours. Where I kind of think there will be a problem is when two people ask similar prompts and ChatGPT gives them similar answers, and then those two people come to the market with something and they each claim that they own it, right? So I go and say, "Hey, write me a story about a rabbit." That gets lost in the woods. And somebody else asks the same thing, and now they both try to copyright that. Who owns that concept? And my guess, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to guess that your claim on a creative work that an AI generated is going to be weaker than your claim if you had created it yourself. That's my guess. We'll have to see where it lands because, I mean, that's going to happen for sure, right? There's going to be patent lawsuits and this kind of thing when it turns out that neither company actually did the thing, and you can't. It's hard to patent. You have to patent a specific method, right? If I was to ask ChatGPT, how do I stop my toast from burning, and it gave me an idea, on how to do that. I can't patent the question, how do I stop my toast from burning, right? Which is all I really came up with. The idea was put together by a computer, right? So if two people ask that same question and get similar answers, we'll just have to see what the courts, a lot of this stuff, it just takes time, I think, to go through the courts and see how they're going to rule. But my personal guess is that something you didn't create, your claim is going to be weaker. Doesn't mean you don't have one, but it means I think it's going to be weaker.
Well, I still think that in a situation like yours, if one person were to use an AI tool to come up with a new idea or a script or, fill in the blank, then I think that there's going to be no claims laid by the AI vendors on the type of output. But when you get two people doing it, I mean, that's the fact that AI was used for it doesn't really seem like a super important factor. And that's already something that we have laws and processes built to deal with. You know, two people came up with the same idea, tried to bring it to market, roughly the same time. Who had the idea first? I mean, we already have rules of engagement for trying to decide who owns that IP at that point, and I think that those rules probably would still apply the way they do today.
So whoever asked the question first, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Or
It's
whoever refined, what they got from the AI tool, into a working proof of concept, or whatever the bar is legally speaking. Um, but I mean, I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of situations where you just ask a question and then just copy paste the answer out of an AI tool and you've got a functioning product of some kind. It's always going to require refinement and a little bit more ingenuity and building and so forth. And whether or not it came from AI, I could at least see the argument for AI is irrelevant here. The fact that you used AI to come up with the idea or to refine the idea or whatever, you could functionally get away with or have a process for addressing these kinds of things that just totally ignores the use of AI.
Is there going to be some kind of actual efficient code of ethics or legislation to control AI? Or is this always going to be ever evolving and legislation likewise will have to be ever evolving?
I don't think that you can make effective AI legislation simply because defining AI is difficult. So I really do think that a lot of this, if they create legislation, it's gonna be difficult because they're not going to be specific. The courts are going to be left to decide, is that artificial intelligence or is that machine learning? And if us three brainiacs on this call have a hard time with that, you can bet the courts are going to struggle with it.
So the big question that you brought up earlier, Nate, and this question is for both of you, is AI spying on us?
Only if somebody tells it to. That's what I would say. If it's as a whole, the answer is I would say no. AI companies that are like reputable, no, right? Sort of like the question if you ask, is Google spying on you? Well, no, because spying implies that it's being covert in some way, shape, or form. It's no surprise that Google is harvesting your data and using it to advertise to you, right? And to provide information to advertisers, right? So I would say Google is not spying on you. They are, abiding by the terms and conditions that you agreed to. So to find out if AI is spying on you, you really need to click on those terms and conditions and see what it says they can do.
Which is what everybody does, correct? They read it.
I always read them all. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, if you think about tools like, ChatGPT, the only information that it really has is things that you've explicitly sent to it. And worst case scenario, it's recording a history of the questions you've asked. And I don't really consider that to be spying. Whether they train on that data or not is a separate question. But even if they do, again, it's not spying. And as we've talked about, it doesn't necessarily mean this is information that would be regurgitated to another user. So I don't really think so. Spying to me implies that you're gathering information that I'm not aware that you're gathering and doing it in a way that, I potentially think that don't even realize you have access to that information. So, a much better concern, I think, a much more well-placed concern would be someone tracking your location through Google Maps. I mean, that's spying on somebody in a way that I don't think AI is really capable of.
Last question. What are some key trends that we can expect in 2024 and beyond in regards to generative AI?
I think it's going to become, right now we're seeing ChatGPT is in your browser, right? And you'll see some, I think you're going to see device integrations. I think you're going to see more plugins and I think you'll find that instead of using natural language, necessarily the user asking ChatGPT, you're going to have tools that might maybe do it on your behalf. So I think that we're going to start seeing ChatGPT and not just ChatGPT, but AIs in general informing products rather than you just having to interact directly with the model.
I think the thing I'm really expecting to take off the most is the plugins. So if you go look at Bard or ChatGPT is a little farther along with this, but Bard's going down this road too. And I would assume we can effectively expect other models to go the same direction. But being able to plug into a third-party application to gather data on the fly to answer your questions. So for example, if you're a Salesforce user and you're a sales, you're a regional director and you want to be able to just ask some simple questions like, hey, show me my top deals or show me the deals that I need to pay the most attention to or something like that, then, you could connect your ChatGPT account to your Salesforce instance and then allow ChatGPT to on the fly start making queries to your Salesforce instance to answer those questions, to gather the data to answer those questions. And I think that we're going to start seeing that really hit a stride this year. I mean, the number of plugins available on ChatGPT specifically is exploding right now, and I really think that's where the rubber hits the road. I mean, it's already a general knowledge tool that's really effective, but when the next frontier there is being a personal knowledge tool that can help you, using your own data. And I really am expecting to see that become a lot more pervasive.
I'm just looking forward to the time when they integrate, at least to some degree, some AI with my Amazon Echo. I'm not going to say her name because she'll answer. But I'm getting a little sick of having to ask 40 different ways to ask what's the temperature or is it going to rain tomorrow. So I welcome that part.
Or don't give me notifications like that anymore. I don't want to hear those notifications.
Yeah. One time I just, instead of turning yellow every day or something to let me know of new notifications, I need to just say once, stop, be done.
Yep. Yeah, it's cool. I'm excited for it personally. I'm less worried about AI just because, I think we always have a tendency to fear what's new. Like Tony pointed out, back when Skyhigh was first born, one of the very first things Skyhigh did was identify cloud services, and a lot of customers bought it just so they could block them, which wasn't the intention, but it's how they used it.
On that note, I am going to end this episode. And gentlemen, I greatly appreciate you assisting me in delving into the AI conundrum, if you will. And again, I've been joined by Nate Brady, the Senior Enterprise Architect for Skyhigh Security, and Tony Frum, Principal Engineer for Skyhigh Security. Gentlemen, thanks again. Have a lovely day.
All right, you too. Thanks again.
Thanks. Take care, man.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. For more information about the podcast or Skyhigh Security's cloud security solutions, please visit skyhighsecurity.com.